Victoria Carter pushed through the revolving doors of Manhattan Elite Medical Center with one hand pressed against her abdomen. The pain had been persistent for 3 weeks now, a dull ache that flared into sharp stabs whenever she bent over her textbooks. As a senior at Columbia studying environmental science, she had initially dismissed it as stress from her thesis deadline. But when the pain began waking her at night, she knew something was wrong. The lobby gleamed with polished marble and modern art installations that probably cost more than her entire Syria college tuition. Victoria felt acutely aware of her worn sneakers and faded jeans as she approached the reception desk. This place was out of her league, but her campus health insurance covered visits here, and she needed answers. Victoria Carter. Checking in for a 2 p.m. appointment with Dr. Helena Morse, she said to the receptionist. A woman with immaculate makeup and a practiced smile. The receptionist typed rapidly, her long nails clicking against the keyboard. I have you right here. Please, take a seat. Someone will call you shortly. Victoria settled into one of the plush waiting room chairs, her fingers nervously playing with the strap of her backpack. Around her, other patients waited with the quiet patience of people accustomed to expensive health care. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through messages from her roommate, Josie, asking if she wanted anything from the grocery store. Victoria smiled at the mundane normalcy of it, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Victoria Carter? A nurse in crisp scrubs appeared in the doorway. Victoria stood and followed the nurse through a maze of hallways. It's more impressive than the last. They finally stopped at an examination room decorated in soothing blues and grays. Dr. Morse will be with you in just a moment, the nurse said, handing Victoria a gown. Please, change into this. Everything off, including undergarments. Victoria's eyebrows rose. For stomach pain, this seemed excessive, but she complied, assuming they needed to do a thorough examination. She changed quickly and sat on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her. Dr. Helena Morse entered 10 minutes later. A woman in her late 40s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a tablet and wore an expression of professional efficiency. Good afternoon, Dr. Morse said, barely glancing up from her screen. I understand you are ready to proceed with the procedure we discussed. Victoria blinked in confusion. Procedure. I thought this was just a consultation about my stomach pain. Dr. Morse looked up sharply, her eyes narrowing as she consulted her tablet again. You are Victoria Carter, correct? Here for the scheduled fertility treatment? No, I'm here because I have been having severe abdominal pain for weeks. I'm a college student. I'm not here for any fertility treatment. A flash of uncertainty crossed Dr. Morse's face. She scrolled through her tablet more carefully, her professional composure beginning to crack. You are 22 years old, Victoria Carter? Yes, but I don't understand what that has to do with fertility treatments. Dr. Morse's face paled as she seemed to realize something. She stood abruptly. Please excuse me for just one moment. She left the room quickly, and Victoria heard urgent, hushed voices in the hallway. Her stomach churned with new anxiety. Something was clearly wrong. After 5 agonizingly long minutes, Dr. Morse returned, accompanied by another doctor and a nurse who looked extremely nervous. Miss Carter, Dr. Morse began, her voice carefully controlled, I need to ask you some very important questions. Have you been a patient at this facility before today? No, never. This is my first time here. You have never discussed or scheduled any reproductive procedures. Absolutely not. I came here about stomach pain. Why are you asking me these things? The other doctor, whose badge read Dr. Samuel Foster, stepped forward. Miss Carter, I'm afraid there has been a very serious mistake. We have another patient, also named Victoria Carter, who was scheduled for an artificial insemination procedure this afternoon. It appears there was confusion in our patient identification system. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. What are you saying? Dr. Morse's hands were shaking slightly as she spoke. Miss Carter, I am deeply sorry to inform you that you have already received the artificial insemination procedure. It was completed approximately 20 minutes ago, before we realized the error. The room spun. Victoria gripped the edge of the examination table, her knuckles turning white. That's impossible. You're saying you inseminated me? How does something like that even happen? There were multiple system failures, Dr. Foster explained, his professional demeanor barely concealing his panic. A computer error merged your patient files with those of another. Victoria Carter, who is 10 years older and was scheduled for this specific procedure. The nurse who prepared you did not verify your identity thoroughly, and Dr. Morse proceeded based on the incorrect file. Victoria's breath came in short gasps. This could not be happening. She was a virgin. She had never even been in a serious relationship. Too focused on her studies and her part-time job at the campus library to date much. You need to reverse it. Whatever you did, undo it right now. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Dr. Morse said quietly. The procedure is not reversible. The genetic material has already been introduced. Genetic material? Victoria's voice rose. You mean sperm? Whose? Who did you use? The doctors exchanged glances, and Victoria saw something that looked like fear in their eyes. Dr. Foster cleared his throat. The genetic material belongs to a client of our fertility program. A very prominent client, Julian Westbrook. Even in her state of shock, Victoria recognized the name. Julian Westbrook was a real estate mogul whose face appeared regularly in business magazines and society pages. He was famous for his massive development projects throughout Manhattan and his equally massive fortune. He was also known for being intensely private and ruthlessly protective of his reputation. This cannot be happening, Victoria whispered. I came here for stomach pain, and you were telling me I'm possibly pregnant with a billionaire's baby? Do you understand how insane that sounds? We understand this is an unprecedented situation, Dr. Foster said. We are prepared to offer you any medical assistance you need, including termination, if that is your choice. We will also, of course, cover all expenses related to this error. Victoria felt tears burning in her eyes. I need to think. I need to get out of here. Miss Carter, please. We need to discuss the legal implications and ensure your well-being, Dr. Morse began. But Victoria was already moving toward her clothes. I need time, Victoria said firmly, pulling on her jeans with shaking hands. I will contact you when I am ready to discuss this further. Right now, I need to leave. The doctors tried to convince her to stay, but Victoria was already out the door, her mind reeling. She made it to the subway in a daze, the crowded train car feeling suffocating as she processed what had just happened. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from the medical center, but she ignored them all. By the time she reached her small apartment in Washington Heights, Victoria felt completely numb. Josie was in the kitchen making dinner, humming along to music playing from her phone. She turned when Victoria entered, her smile fading immediately. What happened? You look like you have seen a ghost. Victoria opened her mouth to explain, but found she could not form the words. How did you tell someone that a medical mistake had potentially made you pregnant against your will? How did you explain that your entire life had just been derailed by someone else's catastrophic error? I need to sit down, Victoria managed, sinking onto their second-hand couch. Over the next hour, she told Josie everything. Watching her roommate's expressions shift from disbelief to horror to outrage. When Victoria finished, Josie was pacing their small living room, her hands clenched into fists. You need to sue them, Josie said immediately. You need to sue that hospital for everything they have. This is malpractice on a scale I cannot even comprehend. I know, Victoria said quietly. But first I need to figure out what I am going to do about the possibility of being pregnant. 3 weeks later, Victoria sat in her bathroom, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hands, despite hoping desperately that the procedure had not worked, that the timing had been wrong, or that her body had rejected it. The test confirmed her worst fears. She was pregnant. That same evening, her phone rang with an unknown number. When she answered, a crisp, professional voice identified herself as Catherine Hayes, legal counsel for Julian Westbrook, Ms. Carter. Mr. Westbrook would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss the situation at Manhattan Elite Medical Center. A car will be sent to your address to bring you to his office. I trust this timing works for you. It was phrased as a question, but delivered as a statement. Victoria felt a flutter of anxiety mixed with anger. She had not asked for any of this, and now she was being summoned, like an employee, to a meeting. Fine, Victoria said shortly. I will be ready. As she hung up, Victoria caught sight of her reflection in the darkened window. She looked scared, which she was, but beneath the fear. She saw something else, determination. She had not chosen this situation, but she would not let it destroy her either. Tomorrow, she would meet Julian Westbrook, and together, they would figure out what came next, whether he liked it or not. The black Mercedes that arrived at Victoria's apartment building the next morning looked absurdly out of place among the aging Honda Civics and dented delivery vans that usually lined the street. Victoria watched from her window as curious neighbors slowed their morning routines to stare at the luxury vehicle idling at the curb. She had spent 2 hours getting ready, changing outfits 5 times before settling on a simple navy dress that Josie had insisted made her look both professional and confident. Victoria did not feel confident. She felt terrified and angry and overwhelmed. But she refused to let Julian Westbrook see that. The driver, silent man in his 50s, opened the door for her without a word. The interior of the car smelled like leather and expensive cologne, and classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Victoria watched Manhattan transform outside her window as they drove. The cramped streets of Washington Heights giving way to the towering glass monuments of Midtown. Westbrook Tower occupied an entire city block, its steel and glass facade reflecting the morning sun like a mirror. Victoria had walked past it dozens of times during her years in the city, never imagining she would one day enter through its exclusive private entrance. Catherine Hayes met her in the lobby. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. She extended a hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "Garter. Thank you for coming. Mr. Westbrook is expecting you on the 75th floor." They rode the elevator in silence, Victoria's ears popping as they ascended at breathtaking speed. When the doors opened, she stepped into an office that looked more like a penthouse apartment than a workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and the furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials. And there, standing with his back to her as he looked out over Manhattan, was Julian Westbrook. He was taller than she expected, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit perfectly. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished air that the photographs and magazines had not quite captured. When he turned to face her, Victoria felt her breath catch. Julian Westbrook was undeniably handsome, with sharp cheekbones and intense gray eyes that seemed to take in everything about her in a single glance. But there was something cold in his expression, a remoteness that made him seem untouchable despite his physical presence. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Please, sit down." Victoria remained standing. "I prefer to stand for now." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or possibly respect. He nodded slowly. "As you wish. Catherine, please give us privacy." Once they were alone, the silence stretched between them like a live wire. Julian studied her with an intensity that made Victoria want to look away. But she forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "I assume you have been informed of the full situation by the medical center," Julian finally said. "I have been informed that due to multiple failures in their systems, I was given a procedure that was meant for someone else. A procedure using your genetic material, and I have been informed that I am now pregnant as a result." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The hospital has been dealt with. Dr. Morse has been suspended, and the facility faces significant legal consequences for their negligence. That, however, does not solve our immediate problem." "Our problem?" Victoria's voice rose despite her intention to remain calm. "This is not a problem we share equally, Mr. Westbrook. I am the one who is pregnant. I am the one whose body has been violated. I am the one whose entire life has been turned upside down. And I am the one whose genetic legacy is now tied to a woman I have never met." Julian replied, his tone remaining frustratingly level. "Do not mistake my composure for lack of concern, Miss Carter. This situation is unacceptable for both of us." Victoria felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Then what do you propose we do about it?" Julian walked to his desk and picked up a leather folder which he held but did not yet open. "I have spent the past 3 weeks having my team investigate you thoroughly. Victoria Ann Carter, 22 years old, senior at Columbia University studying environmental science. You work part-time at the campus library, maintain a 3.8 grade point average, and grew up in a small town in Vermont. Your father died when you were 16, and your mother works as a nurse in Burlington. You have no criminal record, no significant debts beyond student loans, and by all accounts, You are exactly what you appear to be, an innocent bystander caught in a catastrophic mistake. The clinical recitation of her life made Victoria feel exposed and vulnerable. Have you finished investigating me? For now? Julian opened the folder and extracted several documents. Which brings me to my proposal. I am prepared to offer you a solution that benefits both of us. I am listening. We marry, Julian said simply, as if he were proposing a business lunch rather than a lifelong commitment. A real legal marriage that will last for 3 years. During that time, we will live together, present ourselves publicly as a couple, and co-parent our child. After 3 years, we will divorce quietly. And you will receive a settlement of $20 million plus a trust fund for the child's education and future needs. Victoria stared at him, certain she had misheard. You want me to marry you? A complete stranger? I want to protect both our interests, Julian corrected. If this situation becomes public in its current form, it will be a scandal that damages both our reputations. You will be labeled an opportunist who somehow trapped a billionaire, and I will be seen as careless with my genetic material. But if we present a united front, if we tell a story of an unexpected romance that led to marriage and pregnancy, we control the narrative. That is insane, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. She could already see the logic in his cold calculation, much as she hated it. It is pragmatic, Julian replied, and it offers you financial security that you would not otherwise have. $20 million would change your life, Miss Carter. You could finish your education without working. Support your mother. Pursue any career you wish without worrying about money. And what do you get out of this besides controlling the narrative? For the first time, something other than calculation crossed Julian's face. Pain, perhaps, or the ghost of it. I get the chance to be a father. Something I thought I would never have. Victoria sensed there was a story behind that statement, but Julian's expression had already closed off again. She walked to the windows and looked out at the city spread below them. Millions of lives intersecting in ways both deliberate and accidental. Her own life had been on a clear path just weeks ago. And now she stood in a billionaire's office, discussing a marriage of convenience like something out of a novel. If I agree to this, Victoria said slowly, I have conditions of my own. I expected nothing less. What are your terms? First 3 years is not long enough. A child needs stability. We stay married until our child turns 18, or until we both mutually agree that staying together is harmful to the child's well-being. Julian's eyebrows rose slightly. That is a significant commitment. You are asking me to marry you and raise a child with you. Did you expect anything less than significant? Fair point, agreed. What else? Second, I want equal say in all decisions regarding our child. Education, healthcare, religion, if that becomes relevant, everything. I will not be a decorative mother who smiles for photographs but has no actual voice. Agreed. I would expect nothing less from any co-parent. Third, I continue my education and my career. I know you have enough money that I would never need to work, but I want to work. I want my own identity beyond being Mrs. Julian Westbrook. Also agreed. I have no interest in a wife who exists only to serve my needs. What else? Victoria turned to face him fully, her heart pounding as she prepared to make her most important demand. Fourth, and this is non-negotiable. If at any point during this marriage you decide you want something real, if you develop actual feelings beyond this arrangement, you have to tell me honestly. And the same goes for me. I refuse to spend years living with someone and never knowing if there could be something genuine between us. This time, Julian's composure cracked visibly. He stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. You want me to promise to tell you if I develop feelings for you? Yes, because Mr. Westbrook, I may be young and I may be caught in a terrible situation, but I refuse to live a lie for 18 years. If we are going to do this, if we are going to raise a child together, I need to know that there is at least the possibility of honesty between us. Julian was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those intense gray eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. You are not at all what I expected, Miss Carter. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I have not decided yet. He extended his hand across the desk. But I agree to your terms. All of them. Do we have a deal? Victoria looked at his hand, then up at his face. This man was essentially a stranger, cold and calculating, and used to getting his way. But beneath that exterior, she had glimpsed something else. Pain. Loneliness. A man who had built walls so high that he had forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. She took his hand. Feeling the warmth and strength of his grip, "We have a deal." 2 weeks later, Victoria stood in front of a judge at City Hall. Wearing a cream-colored dress that Julian's stylist had selected, Julian stood beside her in a navy suit, looking every inch the successful businessman entering into a merger rather than a marriage. Catherine Hayes and another lawyer served as witnesses, their expressions professionally neutral. "Do you, Julian Alexander Westbrook, take Victoria Ann Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do. And do you, Victoria Ann Carter, take Julian Alexander Westbrook to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Victoria looked at the man beside her. This stranger who was now permanently connected to her through the child growing inside her. His expression was unreadable, but when their eyes met, she saw something flicker in his gaze. Hope, maybe, or perhaps fear, that looked very much like her own. "I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife." There was no kiss, no applause, no celebration. Just the scratch of a pen on paper as they signed the marriage certificate, binding themselves together in a union that was both legally real and emotionally counterfeit. When they emerged from City Hall into the afternoon sunlight, a photographer from a friendly gossip magazine was waiting at a discreet distance, ready to capture the first images of the newest power couple in Manhattan. Julian placed his hand on the small of Victoria's back, a gesture that would look affectionate in photographs but felt stilted and rehearsed in reality. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Westbrook?" The name sounded foreign to her ears, but Victoria nodded. "As ready as I will ever be." That evening, as Victoria unpacked her few belongings in the enormous bedroom of Julian's Tribeca penthouse, she caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror. She looked the same as always, but everything had changed. She was married. She was pregnant. She was about to begin a life she had never imagined, sharing a home with a man she barely knew, through the open door. She could hear Julian on a phone call in his study, his voice low and commanding as he dealt with some business matter. This was her life now, bound to a man of ice and calculation. Raising a child born from a medical mistake, playing the role of wife in a marriage that was really just an elaborate contract. But as Victoria placed her hand over her still flat stomach, feeling the flutter of possibility and fear, she made herself a silent promise. She would not let this situation define her. She would finish her degree. She would be an amazing mother. And if there was even the smallest chance that the cold, controlled man down the hall had a real heart buried somewhere beneath his armor, she would find a way to reach it. The future stretched before her, uncertain and daunting. But Victoria Carter Westbrook had never backed down from a challenge. This would be her greatest test yet. Moving into Julian's penthouse was like stepping into a different dimension. The space occupied the entire top floor of a Tribeca building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the Hudson River and the Manhattan skyline. Every surface was pristine. Every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a design magazine. And the color palette was all grays, blacks, and whites. It was stunning, sophisticated, completely devoid of warmth. Victoria's first morning, as Mrs. Westbrook began at 6:30, when Julian's alarm sounded through the walls. She heard him moving through his morning routine with military precision: shower, dress, coffee, phone calls. By the time she emerged from her bedroom wearing one of her old Columbia sweatshirts and leggings, he was already in his study, door closed, voice clipped as he conducted business. She wandered through the enormous kitchen, opening cabinets to find pristine dishes that looked barely used. The refrigerator contained bottled water, some wilted lettuce, and several containers of what might have been takeout from weeks ago. Clearly, Julian did not spend much time cooking for himself. "Good morning, Mrs. Westbrook." A woman's voice startled Victoria. She turned to find an older woman with kind eyes and graying hair standing in the kitchen doorway. "I am Rosa, Mr. Westbrook's housekeeper. I come 3 times a week, but Mr. Westbrook asked me to come daily now that you are here. I thought I would make you a proper breakfast." "Oh, you do not have to do that," Victoria protested. But Rosa was already pulling ingredients from bags she had brought. Nonsense. A pregnant woman needs good food. Mr. Westbrook told me about the baby. Congratulations. As Rosa cooked, she chatted easily about the neighborhood, the best grocery stores, the parks nearby. Victoria found herself relaxing, grateful for the warm presence in this cold, perfect space. When Julian emerged from his study 45 minutes later, he stopped in the kitchen doorway, clearly surprised to find Victoria and Rosa laughing over scrambled eggs and fresh fruit. "You are still here?" Victoria said, glancing at the clock. "I thought you would have left for the office by now." "I have meetings starting at 9, Julian replied, his tone formal. "Rosa, thank you for coming early, of course." "Mr. Westbrook, I was just telling your wife about the farmer's market on Saturdays." Julian's expression flickered with something Victoria could not read when Rosa called her his wife. "Victoria will need access to all the household accounts. Please show her how everything works." "Will do. Now sit down and eat something. You are too thin." To Victoria's amazement, Julian obeyed, settling at the kitchen island with a plate of food. For several minutes they ate in awkward silence, very aware of Rosa bustling around them. "I am enrolling in fall semester classes," Victoria said finally. "I only need 2 more courses to complete my degree." Julian nodded, cutting his eggs with precise movements. "That is good. I will have my driver available whenever you need transportation to campus. I can take the subway. You are pregnant and you are married too. Someone who receives occasional threats from business rivals and disgruntled former partners. You will use the driver." Victoria bristled at his commanding tone but recognized the logic. "Fine, but I am keeping my part-time job at the library." "Why?" "You certainly do not need the money, because I need some parts of my life to remain normal. Because I like that job. Because I refuse to let this situation erase everything I was before." Julian studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Understood. But the security detail goes with you everywhere." "Security detail? You are assigning me bodyguards?" "1 bodyguard. Marcus is discreet and well-trained. You will barely notice he is there." Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but stopped when she saw the set of Julian's jaw. This was not a point he would negotiate. "Fine, but if this Marcus person hovers, we are going to have problems." The ghost of a smile crossed Julian's face, so brief Victoria almost missed it. "I will make sure he understands." Over the following weeks, Victoria and Julian settled into an uneasy coexistence. They orbited each other in the vast penthouse-like planets, in a carefully calculated system. Close enough to maintain the illusion of intimacy, but far enough to avoid real connection. Julian left early and returned late most days, and when they did share meals, conversation remained polite and surface level. Victoria threw herself into her final semester at Columbia, determined to finish her degree, despite the dramatic changes in her life. Her professors had been understanding when she explained she had gotten married suddenly, though she saw the speculation in their eyes. Her classmates were less subtle, whispering when they thought she could not hear. Taking photos of Marcus lurking in the background during lectures, one afternoon in late September, Victoria was studying in the library when her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Need to discuss something tonight? Home by 7. When Victoria returned to the penthouse that evening, she found Julian pacing in the living room with unusual agitation. He had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and his hair looked like he had been running his hands through it. "What is wrong?" Victoria asked, setting down her bag. "We have a problem. Richard Morrison, one of my primary business rivals, has been investigating us. He knows the timeline of our marriage does not quite add up with your pregnancy. He has not figured out the full truth yet, but he is asking uncomfortable questions." Victoria felt ice slide down her spine. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we need to be more convincing as a couple. We need to be seen together publicly, not just at formal events. Dinners, walks in the park, normal couple activities." Julian stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "It means we need to act like we are actually married." "You're actually married," Victoria pointed out. "Just not in love." "Exactly. And that is what Morrison is trying to expose. He wants to paint our marriage as some kind of business arrangement, which would lead people to ask why we would arrange it." Victoria sank onto the sofa, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. where a small bump was just beginning to show. "So what do you suggest? Tomorrow is Saturday. We are going to spend the day together like a normal couple. Breakfast at that cafe you like in the West Village, a walk through Central Park, maybe shopping for baby things. And we are going to let ourselves be photographed doing it. You want to stage our entire relationship for the cameras? I want to show Morrison and everyone else that we are a real couple who happens to be private. There is a difference." The next morning, Victoria found herself in the back of Julian's car. Heading to Grayson and Company, the cafe where she had often studied before her life had been turned upside down. Julian sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in jeans and a casual button-down shirt. She had never seen him in anything but suits, and the change was startling. He looked younger, more approachable, almost human. "Do you ever relax?" Victoria asked as they approached the cafe. "What do you mean? I mean, do you ever just exist without calculating every move? Do you ever do something just because you want to, not because it serves a strategic purpose?" Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I used to." A long time ago, before Victoria could ask what he meant, they had arrived. Julian helped her out of the car with a gentleness that surprised her, his hand warm and steady on her elbow. Inside the cafe, they ordered breakfast and settled at a corner table. Victoria noticed several people doing double takes, recognizing Julian from business magazines and society pages. "Tell me something real about yourself," Victoria said suddenly. "Not business things. Something personal." Julian looked caught off guard. "Why?" "Because if we are going to convince people we are really married, I should know more about you than what Forbes prints. So tell me something true." He was silent for so long that Victoria thought he would refuse. Then, softly, he said, "I was engaged before. 6 years ago. Her name was Elizabeth." Victoria's breath caught. This was the first genuinely personal information he had ever shared. "What happened?" "She died. Car accident on the way to meet me for dinner. A drunk driver ran a red light." Julian's voice was carefully controlled, but Victoria could hear the pain beneath it. "We were supposed to get married that spring. After she died, I decided that kind of vulnerability was not worth the risk. It was easier to focus on work, to build something I could control." "So you built walls," Victoria said softly, "to keep the pain out." "To keep everything out," Julian corrected. "It was working perfectly until a medical mistake connected me to a woman who seems determined to knock those walls down." Their eyes met across the table, and for the first time Victoria saw him. Not the cold businessman or the calculated strategist, but the man underneath. Someone who had loved deeply and lost devastatingly, and had spent years trying to protect himself from ever feeling that. It's vulnerable again. "I am sorry about Elizabeth," Victoria said. "That must have been horrible. But it was also a long time ago." Julian's expression shifted, becoming guarded again. "We should finish eating. I told Catherine we would meet her at the baby store at noon." The rest of the day passed in a strange mixture of stage performances and genuine moments. They walked through Central Park, Julian's hand occasionally resting on the small of Victoria's back. They shopped for baby furniture, arguing good-naturedly about cribs and strollers. They had dinner at a small Italian restaurant where Julian told her stories about disastrous business meetings that made her laugh. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Victoria felt like she had glimpsed a different version of Julian Westbrook. Not the man he showed the world, but the man he might have been if grief had not hardened him. October turned into November, and something began to shift between them. Julian started coming home earlier, often arriving in time for dinner. They fell into a routine of eating together, discussing their days, arguing about everything from politics to movies. Julian discovered that Victoria had strong opinions about environmental policy and was not afraid to challenge its more conservative business perspectives. Victoria learned that Julian was secretly addicted to terrible reality television and sometimes worked late just to avoid admitting it. One evening in mid-November, Victoria emerged from her bedroom to find Julian standing in what would become the nursery, holding paint samples against the wall. "What are you doing?" she asked from the doorway, trying to decide on colors. "You said you did not want to know the sex before the birth, so I am thinking something neutral. Maybe this sage green." Victoria's heart squeezed unexpectedly. This was the first time Julian had shown active interest in preparing for the baby beyond writing checks for furniture. "I like the sage green. It is peaceful." Julian turned to face her, and in the soft light of the empty room, he looked almost vulnerable. Victoria, can I ask you something? Of course, do you regret agreeing to this arrangement? Sometimes I see you looking at your old photos from before all this happened, and you look so free. I worry that I have trapped you in a life you never wanted. Victoria walked into the room and stood beside him, looking at the paint samples he held. I regret the way it happened. I regret that my choices were taken away. But I do not regret meeting you, Julian. This has been the strangest, most difficult time of my life, but you have been better to me than I expected. More human than you pretend to be. I am not sure that is a compliment. It is the highest compliment I can give you. They stood together in the quiet room, and Victoria felt something settle inside her. Maybe this bizarre arrangement could work. Maybe they could build something real from this artificial beginning, the week before Thanksgiving. Victoria's mother came to visit. Patricia Carter was a practical woman who had raised her daughter to be independent and strong. When she arrived at the penthouse, she took one look at the opulent space and then at her daughter's face, and immediately knew something was off about this sudden marriage. Over tea, while Julian was at work, Patricia got the truth out of Victoria. Not all of it, but enough. That the pregnancy had been unexpected. That she and Julian had married quickly because of complicated circumstances. That they were still figuring out their relationship. Are you happy, sweetheart? Patricia asked, holding her daughter's hands. Victoria thought about the question seriously. I am not unhappy. Julian is kind to me in his way, and I think we are building something that might become real eventually. That is not the same as being happy. I know. But maybe happiness is not always the lightning bolt people say it is. Maybe sometimes it grows slowly, carefully, from unexpected places. Patricia studied her daughter's face, seeing a maturity there that had not existed 6 months ago. You love him. It was not a question, and Victoria did not deny it. I am starting to. Yes. Even though I know I should not. Even though this started as just a contract. But he is still so closed off, Mom. I do not know if he will ever let me all the way in. Then you keep knocking on those walls until they come down, Patricia said firmly. That is what Carters do. We do not give up on people we love. On Thanksgiving evening, Julian arranged a small dinner at the penthouse. Just the three of them and Rosa, who had insisted on cooking a proper feast. As they sat around the dining table, passing dishes and making conversation, Victoria caught Julian looking at her with an expression she had not seen before. Soft, warm, almost tender. After Patricia and Rosa had gone home, Victoria and Julian stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. She was nearly 5 months pregnant now, her belly unmistakably round, and she had caught Julian staring at it, sometimes with wonder in his eyes. Your mother is formidable, Julian said. I can see where you get your strength. She likes you. She thinks you have potential. Potential for what? Victoria turned to face him, her heart pounding. For being happy again? For letting someone in? Julian's expression shifted, his walls visibly trying to rise, but Victoria saw him fighting against them. Victoria, I need to tell you something. What is it? That fourth condition you demanded about telling each other if we developed real feelings? He took a breath, and Victoria could see the effort it cost him to continue. I am developing real feelings. For you, I have been trying to fight them, trying to maintain the boundaries we established, but I cannot anymore. You have gotten under my skin, into my thoughts, into my carefully controlled life, and I do not know what to do about it. Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. You are supposed to know what to do about it. You are the one with all the plans and strategies. I have no strategy for this, Julian said, his voice raw. I have no plan for falling for someone who is never supposed to be more than a convenient arrangement. But here we are, Victoria echoed. Then, making a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was nothing like the polite, passionless kiss they had shared at their wedding. This kiss was real and deep and full of all the feelings they had both been trying to suppress. Julian's arms came around her, pulling her close.
Ow.
And Victoria felt his heart racing against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. I am still going to mess this up. I've forgotten how to do this, how to be with someone, how to be vulnerable. Then we will figure it out together, Victoria said. That is what partners do. The Christmas season arrived with snow and holiday lights transforming Manhattan into something magical. Julian surprised Victoria by taking time off work, something Catherine said he had never done in the 10 years she had worked for him. They decorated the penthouse together, arguing playfully about where the tree should go and whether lights should be white or colored. Julian insisted on white. Victoria convinced him that colored was more festive. They compromised with both. On Christmas Eve, as they sat by the tree with hot chocolate, Victoria felt the baby kick strongly for the first time. She gasped and grabbed Julian's hand, pressing it to her belly. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Julian's eyes widened as another kick came, stronger this time. "That is our baby. That is our baby," Victoria confirmed, watching emotions play across his face. Wonder, fear, joy, love. "I'm going to be a father," Julian said, and his voice cracked slightly. "I never thought I would get this chance again. Julian took a breath, and Victoria realized he was about to share something he had kept locked away. Elizabeth was pregnant when she died. We had just found out the week before the accident. I lost them both that night. Victoria's heart broke for him. "Oh, Julian, I am so sorry. I thought I would never want to risk this again," Julian continued, his hand still pressed to her belly. "But you have made me want to risk everything. You have made me want to try." They made love for the first time that night, in front of the Christmas tree with snow falling softly outside the windows. It was tender and passionate and nothing like the clinical arrangement they had started with. It was real. January brought New Year's celebrations and renewed gossip about the Westbrook marriage. Richard Morrison had finally given up his investigation, unable to find proof of anything inappropriate. The society pages ran features about how wonderful Julian looked, how marriage had softened him, how Victoria was clearly a positive influence. What they did not report was how. Julian had started working from home 2 days a week so he could be closer to Victoria. How he attended every doctor's appointment and read pregnancy books late at night. How they had inside jokes now and secret smiles across crowded rooms. How they had fallen completely in love despite every logical reason they should not have been. In late March, 3 weeks before her due date, Victoria attended a charity gala with Julian. She wore a stunning maternity gown in midnight blue, and Julian kept his hand protectively on her back all evening. They were dancing, lost in their own world, when Victoria felt the first contraction. "Julian," she said, gripping his arm. "I think we need to go." His face went pale. "Now." "But you have 3 more weeks. Apparently our daughter has her own schedule." The next 12 hours were a blur of hospital rooms and monitors and pain, and Julian's hand never leaving hers. He talked to her through every contraction, reminding her to breathe, telling her she was strong, that she could do this. When the doctor finally said it was time to push, Julian moved to stand beside her head, kissing her sweaty forehead. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Victoria gasped between contractions. "Even though this is your fault?" Julian laughed through his tears. "Technically, it is Dr. Morse's fault. I am blaming you anyway." At 3:17 a.m. on March 28th, Sophia Elizabeth Westbrook entered the world screaming her displeasure at being evicted from her warm home. She had dark hair like Julian and Victoria's nose, and when the nurse placed her on Victoria's chest, both parents dissolved into tears. "She is perfect," Julian whispered, his finger gently touching Sophia's tiny hand. The baby immediately gripped it, and Julian looked at Victoria with wonder in his eyes. "We made a person, a perfect person," Victoria agreed, exhausted and elated and more in love with both of them than she had thought possible. Julian leaned down and kissed Victoria softly. "Thank you for taking a chance on this insane arrangement, for knocking down my walls, for giving me a family I did not think I deserved." "You deserve everything," Victoria said, watching as Julian carefully picked up their daughter, holding her like she was made of glass. "And you are going to be an amazing father." 3 months later, on a perfect June afternoon, Julian and Victoria stood in the same garden where they had taken their first awkward couple photos 8 months earlier. But this time, they were surrounded by family and friends. And they were renewing the vows they had spoken so mechanically at City Hall. Patricia stood in the front row holding baby Sophia, was dressed in a tiny white dress. Rosa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Even Catherine smiled as she watched her formerly cold employer gaze at his wife with unguarded adoration. I, Julian Alexander Westbrook, take you, Victoria Ann Carter, to be my wife. Again, and for real this time, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. Not because of a contract or an arrangement, but because you are the love of my life. Because you saw past my walls to the man I had forgotten I could be. Because you gave me a daughter and a second chance at happiness. I promise to love you, honor you, and probably annoy you with my need to plan everything for the rest of our lives. Victoria laughed through her tears. I, Victoria Ann Carter Westbrook, take you, Julian, to be my husband, for real this time. Because you are stubborn and frustrating and secretly watch terrible reality shows. Because you paint nurseries sage green and read parenting books in the middle of the night. Because you learn to open your heart again, even when it terrified you. I promise to love you, challenge you, and definitely argue about paint colors for the rest of our lives. When they kissed, their assembled loved ones cheered. Sophia let out a gurgle that might have been approval or might have been gas. And somewhere in the universe, fate smiled at the impossible love story it had woven from a medical mistake and two stubborn hearts. That evening, as they slow danced at their reception, with Sophia sleeping in a bassinet nearby, Julian pulled Victoria close. Do you remember what you said the first day we met? About how you refused to spend 18 years living a lie. I remember, Victoria said, resting her head on his shoulder. You were right. This is not a lie anymore. This is real. You are real. We are real. You're very real, Victoria agreed. And Julian, yes? I am so glad Dr. Morse made that mistake. Julian laughed, the sound warm and free. That is probably the most romantic thing anyone has ever said about medical malpractice, as they swayed together under twinkling lights. With their daughters sleeping peacefully nearby and their future stretching bright and hopeful before them, Victoria thought about how strange and wonderful life could be, how the worst mistake could become the greatest gift, how contractual obligations could transform into genuine love, how two people who should never have met could become each other's perfect match. Their story had started with chaos and confusion and a catastrophic error, but it had become something beautiful, something real, something that would last not just 18 years or 3 years, but a lifetime. And that was the best happy ending of all.